talking shit, and then now I'm like fucking. All right.
Aliens on the border.
The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found.
Faster than light, spaceship of the future.
By direction of the President of the United States, stay in your home.
Is it human or inhuman? Earthly or unearthly?
Born in that swirling inferno of radioactive dust, there is no word to describe them.
We may be witnesses to a biblical prophecy come true.
Why is it that we usually ignore the fourth dimension?
Is this the human race of the future?
Aliens on the border.
What's up, people? It's Sunday afternoon. We're chilling. I'm drinking water that is safe to drink. It's in a bottle.
It's just, as I get in there. Hey, am I muted? I'm muted.
You're not muted, bro. I can hear you clearly as fuck.
What?
Yeah.
What's going on here?
I don't know, bro.
Okay,
You're tripping.
All right.
Anyways, good afternoon, everybody. It's fucking Sunday afternoon. Welcome to another episode of Aliens on the Border. This is officially episode number 116. I'm just throwing it out there because I've been losing track. But anyways, today we have a very special guest, Roger.
What?
No, I mean introduce him.
I'm the co-host, right? Yeah. All right, guys. So just in case you've been living under a rock in Laredo and you have no idea, you'd probably get cleaner water if you were there, actually. But so okay, yeah. There's some stuff that's been going down lately. Just a little bit of a, you know what? Okay, so Alec here, in case you haven't seen on Facebook, he had a post that went viral. It was a Facebook post that went viral that it was about him being censored at an environmental summit that happened at SAMU. When his slides that were basically the reason why he was being censored were because these slides contained something about the Laredo water crisis, which we'll explain a little bit more in a bit if you haven't already been keeping up, which I'm sure you have. So Alec on here was censored, right? Essentially, he was told to take these out, take the slides out, or not present. And tell us, we'll get into that a little bit more, but introduce yourself, ladies. So
my name is Alec Martinez, Laredoan. Used to work for the city for about a year. At that point is when I was invited to this event where I was supposed to present, but very, very engaged. I feel like I know a pretty good deal about what's going on in Laredo. I know a lot of people that are doing a lot of good work here, and so when the city does awful things, it's hard for me, you know, third, fourth generation Laredoan to just kind of sit by. So that's kind of what brought us to this point.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's do a little bit of a recap in terms of the timeline that's happened so far. Mm-hmm. So last Saturday, we'll just pull up a calendar because I'm like super bad with dates. Last Saturday was September 29th, right? No, 28th. September 28th. There was a water boil issued at like 8 p.m. It's a really weird time. And when the water boil was first issued, it was issued for sectors of South Laredo, right? And then they extended the warning to basically all of Laredo, right? So when they were doing this, they were saying that the reason why was that there were some chlorine levels that were found to be a little low in the system, right? The infrastructure, whatever was going on there. And they issued the water boil for precautionary, basically to make sure that nobody would get sick. That there was no actual tested waters that showed that there was any sign of like bacteria or anything like that was like life-threatening or hazardous to your health. But because of low water pressure and low chlorine, that's usually what contributes to the growth of bacteria in plumbing, right?
That's right. They did find a few samples with E. coli in them.
Oh, okay.
See, I wasn't lying. I just didn't know where the source was from.
I didn't know.
But they blamed it on the fact that they pulled the sample from underneath a tree and that it could have been a bird or some other nonsense like that. So
okay. So all right, yeah. So I didn't know that part. But yeah, okay. So there was
you to believe that or not.
It might be a little bit of E. coli here and there, right? So right. So then that same night, the whole thing it spreads, and then they put this in kind of like a little memo. It was just like a regular advisory, right? That got sent out, and I think the first thing that everybody read was just like, "Hey, air water, it's boned. Don't drink it, and we're gonna get sick." And after that, I'm gonna go ahead and just like include my thing. I made a post that was just said hashtag Laredo Water Challenge, and it was me running a faucet and just going, like just drinking it like that, and it went viral. And I'm not gonna apologize for that. I thought it was hilarious, and A lot of people didn't, but hey, if you don't know how absurdity works, then there's that. But the next couple of days, they started talking about how they were gonna, they had a press conference, right? They talked about like basically who was the one who's gonna take the blame, I guess, because that's what it felt like. It felt like a
That's exactly what it felt like.
It felt
people
like
nah, motherfucker, it was your fault.
Yeah, right. And this kind of led to a couple of people just saying like, hey, look, you know what? Everything's cool. We're already disinfecting the water. It's not a problem. You're gonna be fine. And it just kind of stayed that way. And I think now, we're okay. So then the censorship happened, right? That was the environmental summit that happened Thursday.
This was on a Tuesday,
on
October
Tuesday.
1st.
Oh, when you posted the video was Tuesday.
The
day after, so Wednesday.
Okay, all right.
So that was the day after the press conference, right? So it was already still like even more fresh, and the idea just that they would say, hey, don't include anything about water, especially in your own town, even though it has everything to do with environments and and I think the point of you including the slides in there wasn't so much to talk about the crisis specifically, but more about how usually low-income people are the ones to first feel the effects of climate change.
That's right.
And that's what it was about in terms of that. I didn't get to go see the because you gave the band presentation, which I really liked the way it was like, you gave the band presentation at Frontera yesterday, right?
Yeah. And huge shout out to them, by the way.
Yeah.
Called a few other places. No one was willing to take that event on, but they were very brave and very accommodating.
So they have clean water, so I mean,
fuck it, come drink our water.
Right. So that was that. One of the things that I've seen now, kind of circulating, just to kind of catch you guys up before we get into the questions. The more recent thing has been that now our water smells like pool water. And it's awful.
Oh, okay. So it wasn't just me. I was like, am I tripping?
No, yeah,
or am I swimming in a fucking pool? Because goddamn.
No, yeah, it's bad. It's bad. It smells bad. It's super strong. It burns your eyes. That's for sure. But they sent out an advisory because people started complaining. And in that advisory, I found it very funny that they were just kind of like, oh, it's our annual maintenance. It happens every year. And I'm like, dude, that is
I've never smelled chlorine in my water.
That's never happened. So there was a lot of just like mix-ups that's been happening there with just general misinformation about what you can and can't do with the water. I think as of now, the current state of the water is that you can you can feed it. I mean, you
to
can
animals.
Give it to animals. Yeah,
right.
You can give them to. You can water your pets. you can give it to your pets.
You can water your plants.
You can wash your clothes in it. You can shower in it.
I've been showering in it. By the way, just full disclosure.
You can do all those things. The only thing you can't do is cook and consume and like brush your teeth.
You still have to boil it for all that shit.
You still have to boil it for that. Yeah. So I'm not really experienced with boil bans like this or anything like that, but I was in Corpus on Friday, and they have one like every year apparently.
What?
Yeah.
Well, it makes I don't know.
What's funny is that when the guy who was hosting that show brought us on stage, or he brought me on stage, he was the first one. Hey, let's give it up for these guys. I really do feel for them because they're experiencing, I guess, their first ever boil ban. It happens to us a lot down here or whatever. And, but theirs was different. I think theirs was like fecal matter or something like that was in there. So
poop water.
Yeah, that poop water, right? So all right, man. So I just to kind of dive into it, like how did this start? What was it? I heard like multiple stories. One to me was that it was like a complaint that was sourced back from May that got the is it TCEQ? Okay, yeah, the TCEQ to Texas Commission for
Environmental Quality.
They're the ones that basically get involved at the state level to kind of keep cities in check with like, hey, you're not up to standards on this and this, right? So okay, we have a pretty basic understanding of what's going on with that. How did that start? What was the complaint about? I mean, like, where did we just kind of end up to where we are now?
So there was a guy who had installed water purifiers on his house. He had these big tanks that you could see how the filter was doing. And he installed these brand new filters. And a week later, he noticed that they were already totally screwed. And he was like, well, that's weird. They must have not been installed properly, so he gets 2 new ones. And he notices within a week's time they were dirty to the brim once again.
Damn.
So he submits some of this data over to the city, and he goes, hey, I think there's something wrong with my water line. I'm getting bad water. The city, in its way, drags his feet. A few weeks go by. They never do anything about it. He tries again. Another few weeks go by. He's not getting anywhere with the city, so he decides to go to TCEQ, whereupon they find out that the city hasn't been compliant with
chlorine levels.
With a lot of things.
Oh, so shit. That's just one of them then.
Well, chlorine levels were the big one.
Right,
But
right.
they did find some samples with E. coli and things like that, dating back to May. And so
can you point the mic just a little bit higher towards you? Like, you can actually move it.
How's that?
That's a lot better. Thank you.
Okay, great. So they had found a few things with the water, and so dating back till May. And at that point, TCEQ stepped in and said, yeah, you guys got to give a boil ban notice. Whereupon, after TCEQ gave this mandate, the city waited a week.
Shit.
So TCEQ said, hey, tell your citizens to boil their water. They waited a week before they finally did.
Who's in charge of a decision like that? Like, once CCEQ gives that, like, how who's the one to say, like, all right, yeah, let's get that memo out?
Formally, it's the city manager. But when I worked with the city, the way it kind of works is you've got 9 tyrants on council that kind of run everything. And city managers, they're just...
Sorry, you said 9 tyrants?
Tyrants, yeah.
Right.
Very...
That's a badass band name. Just 9 tyrants.
9 tyrants, yeah.
Right. I would listen to that shit.
Go on.
So when I worked with the city, you had 2,000 employees, and we didn't do anything all day. You know, I'll tell... Well, but that makes... So first I'll get even worse, and I'll say I had somebody in a department... who I knew they would come in at 8, and then they would put their phone up and they'd watch The Office for 8 hours, all day long.
Damn.
Oh, just like us regular people in regular jobs, right?
Yes. But yeah.
I worked at cons. That was the regular, dude.
Yeah.
I think somebody just go kick their feet up, watch The Office. Go on.
And so people would say, like, oh, the people that work at the city are really, really lazy. But it's not that. It's that we have no power. We exist purely to rubber stamp whatever council wants.
Right.
So I couldn't do a damn thing until council directed me to do it. And so the city manager operates the same way. What probably happened is he got that directive, but because he's just sort of a puppy
Figurehead.
for council, he talked to them. They said, well, we'll sit on it for a minute. And then, a point came where they couldn't anymore. And that's when they released the boil ban. So.
Jeez, man. Tomorrow's going to be a shit show. I know that much. There's going to be a city council meet tomorrow.
Which, by the way, one of the topics is voting to give council members a retirement plan.
Nice.
So you go into council, you're an elected member, and then you get a retirement plan.
Yeah, another one of the things in the agenda is finally putting in an ordinance for the 2%, which we fought for the public arts thing.
Yeah.
One of the things that I want to kind of talk about that is... So the guy who's currently under fire for the guy who's in charge of the utilities,
Ria Miazul.
Right? Yeah. So he
wait, what's this person's name?
Ria Miazul.
Yes.
Okay.
So he we were at
That's a crazy name, but okay.
He was, what is he like? He's I don't want to miss.
I don't know.
It doesn't matter. Just an interesting name.
Whatever. Yeah. Anyway, so. We were at city council. We went to city council, and I don't think I ever talked about this on the podcast, but I was part of this thing called Cultivarte, where we went. We basically we pushed and we advocated for 2% of city bonds, which is like city capital improvement bonds, to be allocated for public arts fund, and it was passed unanimously from city council. But there was a lot of people. Well, not a lot. Maybe 3 people who objected. From the crowd, like the people who were there just to kind of be part of the city council meeting, and one of them that objected was the guy from utilities, the one who's currently kind of like in hot water, so to speak, right? And I
hope he can drink that water.
He went in there and he got up and he said, "Hey, why are we allocating this or whatever when I need this for this, and that? And they were like, hey, well, capital improvement that you've got going on is a completely different thing because we have that basically like blocked off for utility use only, right? So things that are like important for like infrastructure. We're talking like things to acquire, bonds to acquire like supplies for like fire departments, police, hospitals, and then at the same time, utilities. All those things are separate from like improvement. They were talking about like mainly for like building like parking lots and renovating streets and stuff like that. Like a bunch of different stuff that they were that was included in our ordinance. So. I just found it funny that the guy went up there and he was kind of complaining about he didn't have enough cash, but then there's like this stuff going on that there's not much being done with the funds that he already has. So,
so a few months ago, the history goes back a while, and so I don't want to say this to absolve this guy of guilt because I think that again the story goes back a lot longer.
He inherited a mess.
He did, but also I want to keep at the forefront of our minds that. The FBI raided our city hall a few years ago.
That was crazy.
Led to 2 indictments and a suicide. The CEO.
Whoa, I did not know about the suicide.
Oh, yeah.
Can we just touch on that real quick?
Yeah, okay.
Quick summary on that. That's crazy.
This is the city. Yeah.
So I'm gonna. All right. So
I'll keep it tab on what we're talking about.
Well, yeah. So. A really important place to pick up is in the early 1990s when Laredo or when the federal government passed NAFTA, right? Because when NAFTA was passed, all of a sudden you had a ton of factories start popping up all over along the border, and they met more pollution into the river. And what the city of Laredo has been known for is city governments give contracts to private groups, private industries, if we don't do it ourselves. So. If you look at the history of Laredo, what we've been doing is our departments are getting smaller. We don't have experts. We don't hire experts. Instead, we just pay that out to a private firm. So if we need, a pipeline fixed, we're not going to hire people that are going to work full time. We're not going to have experts within the city of Laredo. We're just going to give it to this private firm over there. So what the city of Laredo does as a mechanism is it digs into your pockets. It takes the money that you pay in taxes, sales tax, which you guys pay every day, and then they just give it to private industries all the time. So it's just a siphon of your cash into people who are a lot richer than the three of us is pockets. And so what was happening in, I think it was sort of mid to late 2000s, is there was an engineering firm called Dannenbaum Engineering.
Right.
And they were getting a lot of these contracts. Too many of these contracts. So the FBI started to kind of keep an eye on it. 1 million, 4.4 million, 3.2 million, tons and tons and tons. When the FBI came in and indicted them, it turns out that what the engineering firm had been doing had been giving these policymakers kickbacks, like campaign contributions, 5,000 here, 10,000 there. So 2 guys went to jail. The CEO for that engineering firm killed himself right after those indictments.
Holy shit.
So what that has to do with water is there was a big water plant called the El Pico water plant. And
that was when that was going to get started, right?
It did start. So it was 150 million of your dollars, of our money that we pay every year to these guys, right? So this was supposed to be it. This was supposed to be it for Laredo. This was going to take care of the rest of development here on out. We don't have to raise rates on our citizens anymore. Yeah. Well, it was a huge disaster from day one. To this day, it does like 15% of what we paid for it to do. We were all tied up in litigation, Point is, it was a colossal waste of money. And who designed that? Dannenbaum Engineering. And so it's a real tight circle of like horrible, corrupt, and like stupid activity and mismanagement. And so that suicide and those indictments have everything to do with the fact that today our waters, in the words of Roger, totally boned.
Yeah, that's totally boned. It made me sound very unprofessional.
But it's a good way of saying it because that's where we are.
No bueno. All right, man. I have some of the conversations that I had in terms of like what is kind of causing this was a little bit of that, right? Another thing that I guess maybe is kind of contributing to that is the idea that it's not so much on the city completely, more than it is about the unregulated growth of like rich developers that are just allowed to go wherever they want.
The city has everything to do with that.
Yeah?
Oh, yeah, man. So to give you an idea, we what is the word I'm looking for? We incorporate thousands of acres. Every city council, like look at any city council agenda, and up to vote will be we want to incorporate, 5,000 more acres on the north side into the city for development. City developers run Laredo. And one of the things I pointed out in the presentation is when they voted to raise the water rates. So they screwed us in the El Pico water plant,
and they were like, "Fuck it, we're still gonna
we're
raise
going to raise it again,"
which was not supposed to happen. Technically,
exactly.
Right?
We're just going to try again, right? Because when they mess up, nothing happens. When we mess up, we go to jail. Like if any of us were to mess up that bad, we'd be in prison. For them, it's just like, well, can we borrow some more money? And so what happened was is I remember there was an old guy, an old gentleman. He walks up to the podium. He goes, "Please don't do this. Like I'm on a fixed income. I'm on Social Security. I won't be able to afford all the water that I need to survive." Another younger guy comes up, and he points to that guy who had taken his seat, and he goes, "Oh, I'm that guy's landlord. Don't listen to him. Listen to me. Like I'm a developer. I know what I'm talking about." One council member says, "Whoa, whoa, whoa." It gets worse. He goes, "Whoa, whoa, whoa. We should be building a city around people, not private profit." That makes sense. Yeah.
100%.
Another council member, Dr. Martinez, raises his hand and he goes, "Actually, I disagree with that. It's the people who have millions of dollars that get to dictate the growth of the city." And he's saying this verbatim. In no uncertain terms, if you don't got $1 million in the bank, then you don't got a seat at this table.
I have to, it's so weird because that's the guy who kind of championed the whole 2% for
it's complicated
for art.
It's
shit, man.
What a piece of shit, dude. Fuck that guy.
Here's what I learned about council. Yeah,
play some Rage Against the Machine on that motherfucker's face, dog.
Hold on, dude. Just chill. Let's kind of keep it a little civilized for this one. But
all right.
What?
The one thing that I learned about council is, I had my heroes, people who championed causes that I really believed in, who at another council member said things that totally abhorred me. So for me, I've got no heroes in council. I think people will always surprise you. The same person who you are proud of in one council meeting, you'll be incredibly disappointed with in the next. So.
Jeez, dude, that's pretty. Man. All right, let me get back, or not get back, but let me talk a little bit about the way that I understood that it works. So because the person that I was speaking to kind of said that it's not all completely on the city. They said like it was basically like the unregulated growth of these rich developers basically are the ones who go and say, "Hey, I want to build a new subdivision here, like a whole thing, and I'm going to build all of this." But the people that are in charge of the infrastructure and the piping and the stuff to get them everything from a 3-minute response time from the fire department to clean water and access to that has to be done by the city, right? So I am just going to build the houses, and you guys see you later. You guys take care of it, and because of the essential sprawl that's been happening all in South Laredo, because there's tons of new subdivisions opening up. It's kind of impossible to keep track of now. That is kind of contributing because it's my understanding that everything that's been built basically south of Saunders is brand new, right? It's in relative terms to what's already been kind of around in terms of infrastructure. All of North Laredo's kind of got the older stuff, right?
I feel like the oldest shit in Laredo is
in
the Heights.
In the Heights area. So
and downtown, right?
The older stuff.
The center of Laredo is the older shit. The newer shit's on the edges, the north and the south.
And by the way, if you look at a map of Laredo, we're long. We're we grow north and we grow south, and the reason for that is if you got 3 main landowning families that own all that stuff to the east of us,
right?
And so we can't. We just go north and south because of that. So you're right. It is about sprawl, but we can't stop there. We got to ask, okay, well, why are we sprawling? Who's allowing that sprawl to happen?
Because that was the thing that we had kind of talked about, is that a lot of these developers are more instead of looking to build up, they're building out
because it's cheaper and they make more money. And they're not concerned about the well-being of Laredo. They're concerned about making more money.
The bottom line.
Yeah.
Right. And again, the fucking most ignorant person at this table right now. But from what you mentioned just now, where you're like, it's the unregulated growth of these, titans of industry or whatever. Well, whose job is it to regulate them? The cities.
That's
so
correct.
It's still You know.
Yeah, then we were talking about people who are more, in line to. It's weird because I already, and me, I'm not even super close to like any. I've not worked with the city, but I've worked with city council, like on other parts and other projects and stuff, and I've been a part of these meetings and just seeing the way things run. It's so weird, man. Sometimes, you know what I'm saying? It's just sitting down at like, okay, even just like the commission, like the Arts and Culture Commission, and you sit down there, the way they vote about things is so strange because it's not the way they sit down and say like, hey, let's get something that looks nice and that is profound and that is, really speaks to the people of Laredo and their culture. It's more of like, hey, which one of these adhered to the guidelines of the price? And then we'll just choose that one. So it could be, you could be voting on like, something that's like, oh my God, it's amazing. And this is so like, it's a work of art with like, oh, hey, some kid made this in like middle school with finger paint and like, as long as that one could adhere to it, like that's the one we're going to put up. And it's so strange the way they deal with that. So I can just imagine what it's like at the level of like, even higher, like the city council or with them kind of sitting around and be like, hey, like man,
multi-million-dollar projects and shit. Right. Wow. Like what, I don't know, man, what breeds this political climate, right? Like where do these precedents come from? Like how do we inherit this type of system? I mean, I don't even know if you have the answer or not. These are questions I'm thinking about.
I've come to an answer that makes a lot of sense for me. And so I went, and the reason that I kind of got here is we all kind of, we can curse on this podcast.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah,
do whatever you want.
Dropped in how many of them. So
yeah,
I'm gonna have one really good F-bomb throughout this conversation. I want it to be right here.
Right.
I think we all have this suspicion that things are kind of fucked up right now, and things aren't really working for anybody, or at least for most of us. And I always kind of knew that. But I was very privileged. I went to TAMU for a year, but then I eventually went out to Cornell University up in New York, and it's a real rich school, and I went on, had a lot of help and what have you. But one of the things I noticed there is that there were a lot of really rich white folks, and there weren't a lot of poor brown folks at all. And I'm like, wait a minute, why is this way? I knew like 5 people in my tax bracket. I had this conversation, it blew my mind. I knew maybe one other person from South Texas, period, not even from Laredo. I'm talking about from the Valley, from Texas, from San Antonio, like 1 or 2. And I talked to a good friend of mine who's going home for the weekend. And he's like, yeah, I got to take like 6 people back because they all live in my neighborhood. And that blew my mind because I began to see all of these systemic barriers for how our people never get to be in places like that. And because we're not meant to, we're not supposed to. We're supposed to be kept way down here. And the farther I dug, up to that point, I'm like, wow, why is everything so messed up? None of this makes sense to me. It's almost as if, we're all being exploited for the profits of a small few. And when I got to that, I saw how school systems are just a microcosm of this great system. By the time I got out of there, I was radical about it because all of these suspicions had been confirmed. For me, the bottom line is the economic system that we operate in, which is capitalism. And in that system, it just chews up human lives, it chews up the environment. It's by whatever means necessary, we're going to make more money. And one of the things that I like to bring up all the time is, do you know how much money our port makes every year? Let's take a wild guess.
I don't know.
It's one of it's the biggest land
port. We are now
the
biggest, and everybody's always like number 1 land port, right?
Yeah.
So we're the biggest port in there.
Our airport, like 150 million somewhere in there.
Yeah. 20 billion.
Oh, okay.
It is
way off.
Lot of money. It's a lot of money. Where is that money going?
That's a good question, dude.
Where is the money going? It's not coming to us. Our streets are still got potholes everywhere. We don't even have clean water. We're talking about $20 billion. We can't have clean water. With the amount of money that comes to Laredo, our streets could be paid with gold. So we got to ask ourselves, what's going on here? And the fact of the matter is that, in that time, concentrated poverty in Laredo has gone up. And the other thing that's gone up is the pay for CEO and for factory owners and for large business owners. It's easy math. It's easy math. What they try to do is try to make you think that you're crazy, that you're some sort of conspiracy theorist. But it's playing out in the open. Laredo, it's just a microcosm of that. It's just the consequence of that.
I agree 100%. It's just why I don't even know what else to add to that. But yeah, man, I share the sentiment. I mean, and I don't know, like it it's funny because when you bring up the idea of capitalism or alternatives, right, like different forms of organizing, like your economic structure or even just your governmental structure, right? People are always like, oh, dude, but like check this out. Hundreds of millions of people have died. Communism, socialism, all this, and it's like that's not the point. The point is to be able to have like these open conversations, because it's going to be difficult to find a solution to this experiment. Essentially is what it is. We're 300 million people and a giant landmass, different all across the board, but we share that one thing, which is like, I guess kind of like the American dream, which was embedded into our minds by the idea of capitalism, right? But ultimately it's not something that is as attainable as we once thought.
Well, and to address kind of your first thing, that I get that a lot, right? Which is, well, communism, socialism, they've led to mass deaths, in Russia and in China, which is true. But we never talk about like the fact that we had black people enslaved for 400 years, and then after that, when we liberated them, there were literal genocide in the South where tons of blacks were getting lynched on a regular basis. We don't talk about how we totally exploited all the countries that we sort of colonized, in the time that we've been as a country. We took tons of resources from Africa and from South America, and that's why, like, people look at the world and they think there are rich countries and there are poor countries. But we never ask, like, how did that happen?
Right.
Is it just a coincidence that all the poorest countries in the world were at one point either British colonies or the American military was there at one point?
Yeah.
It's super, super clear when you start running the math that way.
So I kind of want to read it back to Laredo. I know this is all relevant conversation, but I do want to kind of keep at the thing that we're kind of on right now. I'm pulling up the question I had. So what are the things that you mentioned? And this is just okay. So I always take the stance whenever it comes to conversations like these, and it's always about like conspiracies and that kind of stuff. Even if it's just kind of like the kind of a crazy truth to be able to like swallow just easily, right? So I always try to take the stance of like, all right, well, let's see if we can find maybe like a little more of like a seated point. Like I don't really feel like maybe there's a full, like, what would you call it, like a systemic like operation to just keep the people like down, like especially like the poor, like make them poorer and the rich making them richer, and maybe that's the case, right? But sometimes it just kind of feels like it feels a little more exaggerated. But to that point, one of the things that you mentioned in your Facebook post, which we'll get into right now, because for those of you who haven't seen, go and check out Alec's page right now. He's got a video basically of him getting censored and having this conversation with two TCEQ employees, right?
No, they
event coordinators.
Yeah, we'll put it that way.
Event coordinators.
Oh, okay.
So
I was wondering that too when I watched the video.
So I'm glad I blurred their faces out. It wasn't. I don't want to put the like that would have been tough. Yeah.
Right.
So in that video or in that post, you use I want to say like it's necessary but very strong language where you say like, hey, the city poisoned your water. What did you mean by that? Do you really feel like the city deliberately poisoned us, or was it just kind of like because of the oversight or negligence? Yeah, of course, that was them inadvertently poisoning the system.
Can you drink your water right now?
I can't. No, I could drink this. But
so whether it's negligence or whether they facilitated that, the fact that it is that your water is dirty. If you drink it, you get sick. The person responsible from keeping that from happening did not fulfill their duties. So I think it was short words to say a long sentiment. I know somebody commented and they were like, "Oh, he's got an activist mentality," which, by the way, I hate that word because it sets apart, and you start getting into this us versus them
it's
mentality.
the whole labeling thing. I understand it. I understand what they mean by that because there's a lot of the times where it's like when you say like it's either an activist or a conspiracy mentality. It's because I always feel like there's, from whatever side, like let's just say me as a citizen and the city as city officials, and it shouldn't be this way whatsoever, but I might have an exaggerated point of view in saying like the city, they poisoned me, and the city might have an exaggerated or an understated point of view of saying, hey, well, it's not as bad as you think. And I think maybe the truth is somewhere in the middle of that, because I've always kind of shared that idea of like, hey, whatever they're telling you on TV versus whatever you're thinking, the truth is something of like a blend of that.
But I think it's an unfair equivalence to go, these people that have the control of every news outlet, that have 2,000 people at their disposal, that have 9 people that are all very, very powerful councilmen that have connections with every other politician in South Texas, are all in control of this narrative and what they say and what one person says when they can't make a presentation. Those aren't the same thing.
Right.
They have completely different control over the narrative. So when they're under exaggerating, and you're in the control of a city of 300,000, that's not just under exaggerating, that's lying.
Right.
If me as one person says that they poisoned our water, I got lucky. They got caught by the media. But to put those on the same platform in terms of the consequences, I think is sort of a mistake, and it's a dangerous one. Yeah.
So all right. Well, with what purpose do you think they kind of like left the? I mean, why did the oversight happen? I mean, like, was it just simply like them not giving a shit, or is it much more than that?
I think it's a combination of a lot of things. When I was there, I saw a lot of negligence. I mean, you got a lot of people who are in director positions, and not because they are smart or have qualifications. It's just
nepotism.
Patron.
Yeah.
Pure and pure. And so I think this has a lot to do with it. This happened in Rio Bravo a few years ago.
Right.
The same guy got indicted. I know there's been some articles circulating that Rio Mi Azul isn't actually licensed by TCEQ. I'm not sure what the actual facts are,
that, yeah.
but I wouldn't be surprised. And so, do I think there was somebody laughing maniacally at the main water line and pouring, straight E. coli into the pipe? Yeah. Like, no,
it's
obviously
the Mexican
not.
Joker, dude.
Yeah. Like
fucking South Park, I hate you.
Yeah. I don't think that, and I think it's clear that I don't think that. But we do not have clean water. My grandparents, in their 70s, 80s, have to boil their water, and
yeah, man,
it makes me angry.
100%, and I agree, dude. Like, it's crazy. It's I'm probably on your side as well. Like, I think that it was like with nefarious intent?
Right. No.
But if you're gonna be at that, hold that title to where you're literally in control of like thousands of people's lives, right? Then like, goddamn, dude, you're doing a terrible job. What are you actually doing? And then a lot of it may, like there's definitely blame to go around, and maybe in the like citizens' point, or like to their point, the I guess ignorance, right? Because but why, like, how we're ignorant for a reason, right? Like and it probably stems from, again, like a terrible public education system,
horrible,
right? And then but again, like I know you want to stick with just Laredo, but like I feel like it's
relevant. Like
it's around like the entire United States is the whole thing, and then it just so happens that this is like a perfect fucking what do you call it? Like, I guess like a test culture or whatever sample size that it's like so evident and it's in your face, and it's crazy.
Okay, go on.
If you don't mind, so check this out. I'm gonna give you 2 examples. One, so when NAFTA passed in 1994, factories and industry exploded. While we got poor, those industries got huge, right?
Right.
That same year, a boy in Rio Bravo swam in the river and died because the river was, even back then, so dirty that he caught brain-eating amoebas.
Holy shit.
So it's happening the same year that we are okaying more pollution into the river. So when you look at that connection of increased industry and private profit, more regular citizens dying and getting sick. The 1980s for the whole valley was a time where their birth defects were at 3 times the national average. Dang. Because the water that they were drinking, the water that we drink, was so dirty that kids were coming out with like frog eyes and misshapen heads and stuff like that.
That explains a lot of people I've seen around.
Dude, they're among us, man. So that was a very, very real thing. And when you look at, the rates of that industry, the rates of those birth defects, the rates at which the water was polluted, the fact of the matter is the way private industry works is let's take a guy named Jeff. Jeff wants to start a business, right? But he wants to outcompete his competitors. If not, he loses his job. So he says, I need a factory so that I can ship a ton of these packages faster than anybody else. But he don't got factory money. So what he does is he goes to investors, people whose whole jobs are to be rich. That's the whole thing. And he goes, please give me $100 million and I'll build this factory and I'll make some packages. And they say, yeah, write him a check. Boom. Well, what's in it for them? Well, they want shares of his company. It's like a slice of a cake. The one slice is one slice. But the bigger the cake, the bigger that slice gets,
for sure.
Relatively, right? So they tell Jeff, they go, we want you to bake the biggest damn cake possible. And we're going to come back year after year. And if we feel like you're not trying to build a bigger cake, we're going to take our money back and then you can't do your shit anymore, right? So Jeff is like, yeah, okay. So it's not about, for example, in 2006, Walmart made $300 billion. I don't know about you, but after like the first million, I'd retire on my money and like play D&D for the rest of my life. But the Waltons don't want to do that. Why Waltons? Well, it's because of that. Because it's not enough to make $300 billion. They got to make $350 billion,
so
$400 billion.
Just a model of infinite growth is like.
And if we live on an infinite planet, infinite growth doesn't make sense. And our whole economic system revolves around eternal growth. We cannot eternally grow.
That's why you talk about sustainable cities all the time, right?
That's right.
Because this is not a sustainable structure.
No. So you're right. I mean, we need to talk about Laredo because that's how people understand. But Flint, right? It's
been going on like how many years already since they don't have?
They still don't have clean drinking water, man.
That's crazy.
It's wild.
Yeah, I feel like that's the situation we're about to like find ourselves
I hope
in.
not. But mind you, the water was supposed to be lifted on Wednesday. Didn't get lifted. The ban is supposed to be lifted today. It's already 3:00. It hasn't been lifted. It's hard to tell.
I was taking a shower earlier today and in the morning, and I thought I got shampoo in my eyes, but I was like, I'm not.
Oh yeah, 100%. I was gonna like, I was actually talking. I was like, hey, my eyes burn. And
okay, so that wasn't just me.
No, it was the chlorine. It was. Okay. You can smell it. Dude, I took a shower before getting here because I rushed from across. So I went and I went and I took a shower like real quick and I left and I was like, as I was driving, I was like, I smell like I just got out of a pool. Like it's
pretty wild, man.
Yeah,
I mean, dang.
I had a thing. Okay.
Yeah.
Just because I don't want it to be an episode, because I do have a lot of appreciation for the city and its people, right? And I know there's a lot of stuff where it may seem like it's a very negative conversation to have, but is there anything you like about Laredo?
I mean, there's a reason why I'm here.
Right,
I love Laredo. I think Laredo's a great city, not because of where we've been, but all the potential we have in the future. I mean, yesterday we had the presentation. The room was full. I mean, it was a small room, but we were standing room only. People really, really care. People love the city too. I love the city not because of our politicians, but because of my neighbors and because of my family and because there's no other place in this country besides this area where we're 96% Hispanic and we're proud of it and we can talk in Spanish and English. That's a very rich thing. For me, it's like the Mexican Detroit.
Right.
Detroit in the 1950s when all the automobile industry went to cheaper labor in China, black people built that city up from the ground and they were proud and they had community gardens that were run by black folk, grocery stores run and owned by black folk. And if you go to San Antonio, you got a lot of Mexican food places, but they're not owned by Mexican people.
No, they're not.
And so Laredo is very unique in that sense where I feel very lucky to be in a place that is so kind and funny. By the way, like you were talking about the jokes that happen when crazy shit like this goes down.
Oh, right, yeah.
And it's because we don't even know what to do anymore.
Right.
So we just laugh at it because it's absurd. Like we don't have clean water. It's 2019. It's absurd. Right. And when we don't know how to handle information, we laugh. And so, I love Laredo. That's why I'm here. But I can love Laredo and be fucking angry at the people who are supposed to be leading it,
right,
not doing a good job.
And so what would you change about the way it's run?
Well, first of all, so a lot of the Arts and Culture Commission, the Ethics Commission, which is a big one, all these other commissions, they're all appointed by people who are on council. So if you have a problem with council, there's no recourse.
Oh,
dude, it's all council.
I have a thing. you know what? Okay,
Just drop it, bro. Don't bring it up and then.
No, it's just the thing is that
He doesn't want to.
Don't honey dick me, dude. Just give it to me.
So I am like really okay. So the city, the Arts and Culture Commission had actual artists on the commission at some point, and now there's just one.
Yeah.
The other people are just people who work at art schools, and it's like that's not the same thing. No, dude. You know what? When we got invited to go present for Aliens on the Border at VMT,
right?
Lady who was doing that, she's parts of the Arts and Culture Commission.
Yeah.
So
cool. Shout out to her.
No.
Okay.
He's very much
had us. It was cool.
the kind of people who are
want to dictate what art is or what.
Yeah, dude, 100%. And it's here's the thing, dude. It's like I've gotten really into this whole idea of like when I'm I just got a message.
They're watching you.
I got this whole idea of like when I've gotten into the just jumping into the whole thing with art in general and starting to have these things like artist talks have been going on, like all these kind of things. I have an appreciation for like the work that goes into a lot of the art that's being done by local artists and people who like Diego and Mauro and he like all these people. And Orly, and they all have what's it called? They all have like a method, and it's a lot to appreciate. And then like they do these little like call the artist things, and they want to like underpay people and not have enough money to go around. And the general like attitude there is very much like, we're just just got to keep it running.
And again, it goes to that conversation about value. People like Mauro create value. People like Diego create value. Their art is amazing. They contribute so much to the city, but they don't get nearly the platform that they should. And so you want to talk about loving Laredo. I love our artists. Talk about being angry at Laredo. I hate the way they're treated.
Mm-hmm. That's fair.
Yeah.
There was I had another question here actually. So, all right, how would you say the city would do a better job at communicating issues like this? Like, how do you think we could better like connect with South Laredo or Laredo in general?
So I think those are two different questions. How can Laredo communicate better with its citizens? Stop lying. Just stop censoring people who want to have honest conversation. Like, I was so astounded. These are like 16, 17-year-old kids. They are intellectually mature enough. It's not like they don't go home and they pretend like they don't have clean water. Like, they know. Yeah. So I was like, why are we pretending like this doesn't exist? So that's one. Let people criticize you. So I got ran out of the city because I was criticizing one of our council members when he said that.
I actually, you know what? If we're gonna do that, I do want to talk about that because I will say that, like, for one of the things that I know, just because I work closely with people who work closely with city, the whole thing is that like people really don't like you in city council, dude. Like because
it sounds to me like you drop hot heat on them,
right?
And
they'll come out and they'll say just straight up like, "Hey, this guy, troublemaker, and this and that," and that to me, if anything, is a telltale sign of like, all right, well, they're scared. That's what it is, because when you get to the point where you're an appointed official and when you're an official in general, when you're a city official and you start talking bad about somebody who's just basically voicing concerns and saying like, hey, look, it's because the thing is you don't understand the urgency. Apparently you're sitting, you're comfy, you've got clean water, and you know what, I'm pretty sure after this you're probably gonna have some scapegoat somewhere without having to catch any of the shit that we've been throwing, right? And instead of being like, hey, you know what, you're right, we can sit, we can talk, we can address this properly. Instead, it's like, hey, I'm going to sit in a closed room and I'm going to tell you what I want to tell you in a controlled manner. And if you try to like keep talking, I'm going to tell you, hey, we already addressed it. Why are you bringing it back up?
Well,
you're a troublemaker.
It's a fear of being held accountable is what it is. They don't know what to do with that. And I've had council members literally lie about, like, there was one council member who, for a big project that I'd worked on very much, and then I had to leave, so I didn't get to see it through.
What do you currently do?
I would prefer not to talk about that because
I know
I've also been reprimanded there too.
Fair enough.
And that's the other thing is that we talk a big game about freedom of speech, but if I lose this job, it's gonna be the second one in the row for just trying to defend my
you're
community.
no longer working at the city capacity.
I'm
right?
no
Okay,
longer
cool.
working for the city.
All right, continue.
So yeah, there was one council member who, said something like he met with me and my wife, and he was so angry and vicious toward us that my wife felt afraid, and so we had to leave the meeting. And I was like, I have never met with this man and his wife ever in my life, and so it's
Damn.
for me, it's a lot easier to be confirmed, because I see those things and I'm like, yeah, like because they gaslight you. That's the whole thing, is they gaslight you. They make you think that you're crazy,
right?
That you're
you
being
did
dramatic.
something that you didn't fucking do.
Exactly,
right? Yeah.
exactly. But then and so it's a constant. You have to constantly confirm yourself. No, like, I'm not crazy. This shit is fucked up, and that can be tough. And especially when you successfully piss off the most powerful people in this part of the world, like, it gets scary. Like, I get text messages where I'm like, I got to start looking over my shoulder. It's frightening. So if you guys find my body behind a Kmart in like a wedding dress,
No way,
like,
what?
I can show you. I'm not gonna do it on air, but I could show you messages
man,
right now.
crazy.
What? Could you give us a breakdown of like a text message that you've received?
Just things like, hey, watch out for this politician
XYZ.
because this person, Yeah,
Bro, city council out here like Walker, they got hitters, dude.
Yeah.
That's some wild shit.
I mean, I'm not lying. I'll show you.
No,
I'll show you
I
these
believe you,
messages.
dude. I believe you, because when there's
What?
absolute power corrupts absolutely.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And so,
It's the
and
truth.
the other thing is, like, there are a lot of people who do a lot of good work, but a lot of the conversation centers around voting. We've been voting for decades, and very little has changed. I'm less concerned about who we're putting in positions of power, and more concerned about how we can bring that power back down to us, the people. Because the more that we can sort of break that power down amongst more of us, the more people that are involved, the more people that are informed, the more harmonious and the more conversation that we're having. When you suck it all the way up to the top and there are 9 people that are in control of our whole destiny, that's when you get this kind of stuff.
Fucking Lord of the Rings shit, bro.
It
9
is.
rings to
The
rule them
ring
all.
wraiths,
For
bro.
real.
Nice.
The ring wraiths.
Dude, and I feel like probably the first step into being able to live in that type of an environment would probably be providing better information for the general public.
That and like, okay, let's say you're working 2 jobs, you got 3 kids, your dad, dad's not in the picture, you're a single mom. Like, are you gonna give a shit about trying to get to the city council meeting?
That's my point though. Is like one of the things that I always felt like very like, hey, you are seen, and I think maybe this is why. We'll talk about it a little bit with the let's see, like the
2016?
the 2016
Elections?
elections,
Presidential elections.
Yeah, that
Okay.
we had that whole basically political awakening in a sense where it was like people didn't understand what the fuck was going on with government in general, like national government, and what it was like to get a presidential seat elected. And people didn't understand until they said, hey, because this is never going to happen. It's never going to happen. Trump is no way he's going to win. Hillary's got like a 97% predicted outcome. And then sure enough, and then that happened, right? So then you had that whole thing, like, yeah, people understood, hey, you know what? I'm getting lied to, right? First off, I don't understand how government works, so maybe I should pay attention a little bit more. And things aren't always as what they seem, as they seem, because it's a little ridiculous the way that went down. And now people are trying to take a little more of a stand and trying to understand. But then we also have the flooding of like this current presidential election, the climate right now that's going on. That's besides the point.
It's not.
It's 100% the point.
I have been to a number of city council meetings, and I have been to a number of like meetings of how it works in like the background too, how people are just kind of like how they go about, putting like meetings up together and stuff. I've sat at a table with Martinez, at Lolitas, and we kind of just sat there. We were like, talking a little bit about what was going on or whatever. And it's the same thing. Lolitas Bistro is the restaurant, right? And me and like a couple other people, and like, we were like sitting down there and talking a lot about what it is to start getting ready for the next meeting, and how we were gonna like talk about this kind of stuff. And I never once was I was like sitting there and getting this like the vibe off of him, like hey, no, you don't understand what's going on here or whatever. Like, let me tell you a little bit. And I always thought he was like a cool dude. And he started telling me that there's also like there's a chance that you could be lining your pockets. I'm just kind of like, Like, I want to distance myself from that, but I also want to.
But
find
also, how much?
no, but also, I want to know, like, hey, look, if anybody's watching this and they want to shut me up, just I need some cash, dude. I'm kind of hard.
For real.
But no, actually,
that clean water shill money, dude.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
we'll get you clean water.
The next episode of Aliens of the Border is gonna say brought to you by City of Laredo. It's fucking in a whole new studio and shit. Right.
Stop, dude.
So right, yeah. My whole thing was like, if you actually.
So at any point in time during that meeting, did you see him shapeshift into the reptilian?
All right, I'm not gonna.
I'm totally playing.
So I didn't want to make this a thing, but it's like people only started caring or started like holding the city accountable for things like this when it was like, oh, I only ever see it twice. One crisis like this happens, which I don't know if it's ever happened before, at least not in my lifetime that I can remember.
Yeah.
But that, or two, hey, there's going to be an increase in taxes.
Yeah.
Right? Which is fine. They're appropriate responses, right? But nobody's ever actually been. I don't see it too often where people go and they okay. Where people go and they take a look at these, city meetings that happen, and they don't go and they voice their complaints or their opinions. Yeah. And I'm sure there are a select few. Actually, in my time going to these council meetings, it's usually the same people, right? Who go and they'll basically, they'll say like, hey, this is going on, guys, whatever. Right. And some people are very timid about it. They'll get up there and just say like, hey, this is, and the city council will be like, hey, shut the fuck up, like, like sit down, like it's done. We're taking care of that. But that's what I'm saying is that there's not enough representation for people who are like the citizens, the same ones that are being outraged by decisions that are being made at these meetings when they're not at them to see it being done.
Right.
I was sitting there when and I'm just gonna say this. I'm gonna throw myself in the ring with that. When we were doing the whole 2% thing. Mm-hmm. It's kind of still up there like, what the fuck are we doing? Is it really is this how it goes? Yeah. Like, am I just gonna get up here and kind of talk about what it's like to have a city that doesn't have an art budget versus other cities that are very comparable to ours, if not much smaller, because we should consider ourselves a metropolitan area because of Nuevo Laredo, but I mean we don't.
Right.
That's one of the things that we can talk. And as I was doing that, then they were like, yeah, dude, we're all for it. Anyone want to vote? Yeah, all in favor? Aye, okay, cool, done, sit down. And it was like, whoa, like. Yeah. I had to confirm with the people that were with me. I was like, "Hey, we do it." Yeah. It's weird, and so like I think there's people. I think you need to kind of you learn the lingo, and you can kind of like trip them out a little bit if you do so. Like, hey, look, I'm putting forward a motion to like add this to your agenda the next time, and then I'm gonna be here with people, and I'm gonna tell you exactly what we the people want from the city. And if you were to do something like that, like organize something, you'd have them like little fire under their asses, and then you start getting text messages like that.
That's right.
So I'm sure, but
well, and so the thing that I say all the time is the only thing stronger than the city and its patron system is its citizens. There are more of us. What they're afraid of the most is not getting up and yelling at them. They know how to wave that off. They press the buzzer. They sit you down. Yeah. What they're afraid of is us, the citizens, coming together, north and south, west, everybody coming together, educating each other, depending on one another, organizing. When's the last time you guys ever saw a mass protest over at City Hall?
I've never seen one.
Yeah, it's never happened because for a lot of reasons. But the fact of the matter is that we live in a really unprecedented time where the contradictions of capitalism are very clear. There's not a week that goes by where you can get on Facebook where there's not a mass shooting somewhere, or like another amazing species, or several haven't gone extinct, or like the sea, temperatures are rising, or our president did something crazy, or we're just bombarded with all of this crazy shit that we're just like, is this real life? Like, is this a real thing? And then when you compound local issues, you're like, okay, obviously something's not working. And what I think I've been really surprised by is, I know, so there's a young woman who's primary in Cuellar. Regardless of whether you agree with her politics, that has not been something that anybody's been daring to touch for decades. Cuellar has been in position for a long time, right? I know Senator Zaffarini was in that conversation. There were tons of people, like regular citizens, who were calling her out. Before this, people were terrified of her. So all of a sudden, you've got people that are willing to stand up and question why it is that we haven't been led to any good places. And I think that's been really inspiring. And I think that's only going to continue, because the alternative is like this happens more and more often.
Right. Yeah.
So
that we don't have any sort of a system of accountability for officials, and that's weird to me too. Like, who keeps them in check other than us complaining at the state level?
So what is supposed to keep them in check?
Who watches the Watchmen?
I was gonna say are the rules, right? They're supposed to be abiding by some rules, and I'm sure you guys are familiar with Vish and our Laredo, and I know they're controversial, but they do their homework, and they're working class Laredoans that just care about Laredo. And there's a clause in the charter which is the rules of the rules for city council, and one of those clear as day rules says only the acting city manager can, or only the full-time city manager can put people in heads of departments. They're the only people who can hire people for those positions. Well, we've had temporary city managers for a few months now, and they've been putting people in left and right. We had a new planning director, a new economic development director, a new
city
HR director, by the way, who was the last city manager's like niece or daughter or something, which obvious nepotism, but we don't have time to talk about that today. And so they were doing all of this like clearly and egregiously overreaching their powers. So Vish goes up and he goes, council, like, read it right here. It's clear that you guys can't be doing this. And George Algeld responds, he's like, well, that's how you read the charter, and we get to read it the way that we want. Like, we're the city council
that's
members.
the guy who says,
like, oh my God, then what else?
Here's the thing
what else
too,
do we have?
That's one of the things too, is that they're kind of, some of the dudes are on city council and dudettes too, because some of the people on city council are they're eloquent, and that's scary. It's dangerous, because let's say like it was someone who was giving a very valid point of like, hey, before you allocate any sort of money towards a budget of like beautifying Laredo or like through public art and something, why don't we just keep the place clean? Because there's a lot of stuff that just isn't clean right now, and why don't we do? And it was a valid point, because honestly, I'm good with either one of them, whatever, because I know one of them is going to bring about the other eventually, right? But she had a good point, and then I think it was Alec actually who said like, hey, look, it's time that we put lipstick on this pig. And I was like, what the fuck does that mean? It was just like, it was an obvious misdirection. Dude. It was an obvious misdirection. Like, hey, whatever, let's get some art, and it was I found it like really funny that he just kind of said that. But let's get into the because we're kind of nearing. We've got a little bit of time, maybe like 15, 20 minutes. But let's get into the. Somebody just messaged me. You think Alec would be able to get inside council, vote him in to start shit, or he's not into politics like that? If people want you for council, dude, does it start getting
I want.
What if you get corrupted while you're
exactly? And so here's the thing: is that we put our hope in these people, and a year goes by, and they're falling for the same things that everybody else put in there. And so, when you vote somebody in, they no longer derive the power from the people. Because let's say you vote Roger in, right? Roger goes door to door, he gets everybody's votes, they vote Roger in. All of a sudden, Roger's not accountable to you anymore. He's already in. He doesn't have to do anything you want him to. And so, boom, his power no longer comes from the people, his power comes from the institution. And the institution, as we've seen, is fundamentally opposed to the goodwill of the people.
Right.
So, I told J. Ram this, I'm more interested in talking to our people than I am our politicians. That's where the power comes from. If anybody wants to believe in me, that's how I want them to believe in me. Not because I hold any sort of title like city council or whatever.
So I wanted to get into what happened exactly at the summit.
Yeah.
You did say that it was the directive to censor or just not have the conversation was given by someone. The conversation that I had with this person the other day that I was telling you that, was saying a couple of things ago, it's about unregulated growth and all that stuff, whatever, did kind of mention to me that the people that were there, it wasn't so much that they were looking to censor and not have the conversation, more than it was that if people were to ask questions, they don't have anybody there ready to answer those questions, which still brought about to me like, well, why? Like, this is a very current like event that's happening, and I mean, you're in the midst of having an environmental summit where there's a water crisis going on. So it's like, why don't you have anyone here that can answer those questions then? You know, you're telling me they're too busy handling the other thing, but you just finished telling me that you handled it. Right. So what's going on, you know? But
and she asked me that, and she said, well, you know, and by the way, I only had one slide, and it wasn't anything technical. It was 2 headlines from LNT. Right. One said the ban had been lifted for North Laredo. The other said not so much for the South. And again, I wanted to illustrate the point that the poor are the ones that get hit the hardest. And it you know, we've got a limited source of water. The less water we get, you know, whoever's the most powerful are going to have their hands on that last little bit. It's not hard to see. And so she asked me that. She goes, well, what if somebody asks a follow-up question? We don't have the knowledge able to answer that. And I'm like, well, why don't we just say that? We'll say, that's a great question. Unfortunately, we don't have anybody that can answer that. You know, call your local council member. And she was like, well. So
that's fucking awesome.
You look at the video and it's very clear that they couldn't provide.
Oh, it was so awful, man. Like it's kind of like, you know, you're telling. I remember seeing that part. You're telling me that, you know, and the girl started trying to explain. Well, it's because it's not that. The thing is that like. The tanks, and you know what? I'm not part of the department. I was just kind of like, hey, well, you tried, right? I mean, that's cool. I'm not part of the department, but I kind of understood what it was that they were telling us. But it was still, I could have told you, like, hey, just don't fucking talk about it. They don't want to. Just tell me straight up. Say, hey, look, we don't want to talk about it because there's a lot of heat behind it, and right now we don't have anybody to give straight answers, and you're just gonna incite more. Like not necessarily misinformation, but like outrage over something that there's not, you know.
Which again, like why should
not entitled to our outrage?
Right at this level of like?
Well, that's what I said when I posted the thing.
Yeah, there was one part, and I think this speaks volumes. There's one part where she goes, "Well, it's because that," and we'll get into that in a minute. Because remind me because I need to touch on that too. But she goes, "Well, it's because you know citizens they've been really aggressive lately. You know, they see us and they say things like, "Hey, clean our water." And I'm like, yes,
that's your job.
We're gonna be angry.
It's kind of like if I was like I was a cashier.
Dude, I'm sorry, I just like took a shit in your sink.
I was a cashier at Sears for a while, right? And a bunch of people would give me shit because I didn't give a shit about the job. To be honest, I didn't. It was a piece of shit job. I hated it. I would be like sitting there, and I'd be not on my phone, but I would have like a little sketchbook, and I'd just be like drawing there, and then like. Somebody I wouldn't notice would put their clothes down, and they wouldn't say anything. They'd just be like standing there. They put their clothes down at the register in front of me, and I'd just be there, and be like, "Hey, can you help me out?" I'd be like, "Oh, fuck, yeah, all right." And that's it. And like you know, it's the same thing. Like, hey, like I'm not gonna be like, "Hey, why are you fucking banging your hands at me?" I said, "Oh, you know what? It's because I'm not doing my job." That's right, right. But I mean, it's the I understand that, but that whole thing. So there was one thing. In that video, again, you haven't seen it. We'll repost it, maybe. I guess we'll put it in the show notes or something. But in that video, that lady who you were speaking to, once you mentioned, you're like, "Oh, it's 2 slides," and then you show the slides that it was there, right? And you said it's there, like, "Hey, water ban lifted from North Laredo and South Laredo, still dirty water." Right. And she's like, "Well, yeah, but when you pit 2 sides like that, you say like one like north side has this and south side has this. It's because you're instigating." And I was kind of like, I mean, it's facts.
Well, it is a fact. And so 2 things. One, ladies like clearly trying to prevent any sort of class consciousness from arising in our people. Going like, wait a minute, why don't I have all these nice things, you know, like, and I think people are entitled to ask that question.
They took our Starbucks, bro.
Yeah, they did.
You know, this, and to go again macro real quick, this idea of a meritocracy, where the harder you work in America, the more you get. My grandfather, he's nearing his 80s. That man has been working on cars for his whole life. He's a mechanic, and that dude's lives his whole life, served in the military, by the way, and will die in poverty. Like, this man is the hardest working man I know, and I know you guys either have grandparents or cousins or whatever that work damn hard.
My dad was one of the hardest working dudes that I know. He was a custodian at an elementary school. He washed cars on all of his time off. He would paint houses. He'd do all the housework, all that stuff, like just to keep us comfortable. Deported.
Yeah.
I mean, like, and it wasn't so much just like he spent,
sorry.
you know, like 30 years of his life doing all that stuff, whatever. It was literally just like, you know, hey, you're no longer welcome here, and you won't be for the next 10 years. And I go and I visit him. Hey, but you know what? They're doing it right. They're doing it right because he carried that working like ethic with him over there, and they have a nice little house now. It's pretty cool. But still sucks, I mean, it still sucks.
I mean, it's still a different ass country.
Like I can't be with my family, and so that is institutional violence, right? Like that is a violent act. I'm going to remove you forcibly from your family, even though you pose no threat to society. In fact, you are contributing to society. And so when people take to the streets, you know, the biggest criticism is always they're being violent. And I say, no, they're defending themselves. The violence is happening from the top down. And so when she said you're instigating, me, one lowly little person that lives, you know, in South Side, Laredo, is instigating. I'm the instigator, not this multi-billion-dollar institution that cannot even provide us clean water. And so we would constantly put the blame back on the individual. What I'm saying is anything that we do is not violent. It's self-defense. It's protecting ourselves and each other. And that is the language they use is, oh, the citizens have been aggressive. You're instigating. It's putting it back on you. And we have to try to remember that is not the reality here. We have to define the narrative. Otherwise, we go crazy.
Yeah, I mean, we've actually had pretty, like, you know, we've had conversations to that vein quite a bit, actually, talking a lot about, like, you know, how just in general, like, the outrage that people choose to not show. I'm not saying that we're not like, hey, let's incite violence and violent, you know, protest. No, it's not that. It's simply inciting people or evoking a response, man. Like, it's just simple as that. Like, you need to have people who are like conscious about you know, the situation that they're in, and how it is that they're going to overcome that is, you know, completely unclear if they don't even get off of their asses to do anything.
Yeah, right.
And it's not so much that, you know, oh, I'm putting all the blame on citizens. Absolutely not. You shouldn't have to be doing that to begin with if things were run correctly.
Right.
But it's obviously a lack of oversight from the city, but a lack of, like, holding them accountable from citizens as well.
Yep.
And, you know, also themselves, because you trust these people to get up there and run and manage themselves. Like, I mean, I had to manage myself because I had a remote manager, so, like, I wouldn't really have anybody who would manage me at my job that I was doing, but I was still doing my job. I was always hitting my metrics, and I was being pretty honest about it. But at any time, I could have done what any of the other guys would do, would end up getting them fired, where they would go and they would punch in, and then they dip, and then they just, like, hang out at home or whatever, come back, punch in, and then that's it. And nobody would find out until one day, like, somebody would be like, oh, hey, I'm here to visit your store. Where are you at? It says you're punched in. I'm at lunch. You're not punched out for lunch. And so they go and they check the things, and then that's it. You're out. You know, so it's things like that. But I mean, dude, when you said that whole thing about, oh yeah, the city employees don't really do anything, you know, like, dude, awesome, I want one of those jobs. But also, like, that sucks. You know, it's awful.
And it just to reiterate, and it's not because they don't care.
Right. They have no power. No,
we were barred. We were not allowed. Matter of fact, I got reprimanded. My boss said I was doing too much at one point in time. He said, take it back, like, slow down.
Hey, man, so instead of 10 episodes of The Office a day, keep it to 5, all right? I don't want you to run through the whole fucking season.
I was giving him plans. I'm like, you know, we can fix these sidewalks, put bike lanes here, you know, infill development. He's like, slow down.
Let me ask you something. You were working as a I remember you were working for the traffic city traffic.
That's right. I was in the traffic department.
The traffic department. Yeah. And what was your position there?
The bicycle pedestrian coordinator.
Cool. So bicycle pedestrian coordinator. Yeah. And in the year you were there for a year.
Just under.
Just under a year. In that amount of time, how much did you get done?
Unfortunately, not a lot.
You got I know you got the bike lanes painted.
Got some of the bike lanes painted on Convent. That's right. We applied to some big, like, multi-million-dollar grants. We
brought scooters.
We brought scooters. We adopted some new laws to make it hopefully a little bit easier. We adopted Vision Zero. Sidebar. cars are one of the most dangerous things in the country. It's a leading cause of death. We tend to think like, scooters or bikes, is dangerous. But getting behind the wheel of a car is the most dangerous thing we do on a regular basis. And they also make for a shitty city. Like when if your out of town friend came to visit and they're like, show me like the cool poppin' part of Laredo, where would you take them?
Damn, I don't know.
Downtown.
Yeah, I guess.
Downtown, I guess, right? And that's the densest, most walkable part. So when we think about the cities we like to visit, they're walkable. You walk out, there's street life, there's people playing music.
And there's very much, and actually, I remember I read a post somewhere, it was online, it was basically about the study of like cities that were built for walkability more than they were for the motor car, and that was how they were just happier all around. It's happier, healthier, more sustainable, healthier, So that much I understand it. So in that time, you did a lot. I mean, because they were all things that I can recall and I can mention. Not so much because I was like I didn't actually become like not necessarily your friend, but acquainted with you up until fairly recently when we started with the whole art stuff. But I had heard of all the stuff that you had accomplished before, and these were all like things that just felt like they were happening so suddenly, and it was just from one week to the next. It was like, oh, we got a bike lane now, and hey, we have we're able to make it more bikeable downtown and safer. And at the same time, now we have scooters. Other than a failed convention center project, I can't remember anything else that kind of went through like this whole thing in the city. You know, and that whole public arts thing is one thing that I'm really proud of. That happened, and that was like that was literally just 6 months of work, and that was other things we had, and again, like props to Alyssa and Regina who from Cultivarte, who I don't know if they're listening right now, but I think they're like at weddings or something. But they're
always at weddings.
Always, man, always. I kid you not. It's like every time, like, hey, what are you doing this week in this podcast? I don't know. I'm not at a wedding. Very cool. But right. So these are all. So it's possible to get things done because I've done it, and like maybe not by myself, but I've definitely helped, and I've been part of a process where it was like, hey, it's very easy to get things done if you have the right avenue, right? And apparently, if you kind of fall in line and you don't piss people off, I guess that's one thing. But so why is the city so anti progress?
It's not that it's anti-progress as much as it is committed to tradition. And it just so happens to be that our traditions are really bad. I mean, in order to understand the fruit, you got to understand the roots. And we're rooted deeply in this kind of nepotism and this cronyism and the patron system. And the fact of the matter is that there's a lot of money in sprawl, right?
Yeah.
If I can buy this, so I would say par for par, land in Laredo is more expensive. Like apartments and houses are more expensive in Laredo than they are in San Antonio, and that's because San Antonio's got a diverse number of landowners. In Laredo, it's like 3 major families that own like 70% of all the land. And we're not even talking about like landlords. I'm just talking about the people who own the land. And then the land developers jump in and they build houses cheap and they sell them really, really expensively. And when you have a monopoly on it, then you can get away with it. And then on top, you have multi-billion-dollar families that are asking for tax abatements. I'm not going to name any names, but there's some ridiculous projects on council right now. And so there are 2 ways to look at a house, right? There's one way, which is the way we look at it, as a place that we're going to shelter ourselves and our families, like it's a home for us. That's one way. And then there's looking at it like a commodity. It's a way that I can make a profit somehow. And that is the way we look at homes in this country, but also in the city. It's a commodity. It's not a community thing. It's a commodity thing. And so suburbs are horrible for the environment. They're horrible for our social welfare.
There's one suburb specifically, and I think it's near the SAC. I think it's an Armadillo subdivision that right now is kind of like gotten to the point where everybody just started selling their houses in the area. I'm not sure if you've heard about that.
No, I
it's
haven't.
Weird. One of my bosses, I used to have a boss that lives there now. He bought a house there. Hey, he told me, he's like, it's weird. I've never seen what looks like a subdivision. I've never seen it fail. Like this looks like a failed area, and it feels like I bought a it feels like I bought a business in a bad plaza,
Yeah.
and like now I have to like go bankrupt or something. It's weird, like him saying that, because it's like that's true. You know that you're saying they structure it like a business.
Right.
They built all of these houses there without anybody to build them for. They literally just built them.
Yeah,
and it was
and
like, hey, you want a house? Like, come get it.
It has nothing to do with housing people.
Right.
Building houses has nothing to do with housing people. It's everything to do with just making money. Just stupid. It's just
Right.
and it's a problem of capitalism. And to that effect, like when you look at other places that have like tight knit communities and people that are neighborhoods and depend on one another, and I'm going out this weekend, keep an eye on my house, and those kinds of things, that requires a whole different kind of social fabric, right? A whole different kind of environment, and we don't take into effect how our physical environment affects us and how we think. If I live in a suburb and there's a big ass lawn and a row of hedges between me and my neighbor, I'm never going to say hi to that person. And so we live in an age where we don't even know who we're living beside. It's crazy. We're
Shit,
social
I already live that way,
creatures.
and I can see their house like with no hedges.
Exactly.
I'm
'Cause
actually
it's not
super
incentivized.
tight with my neighbors. That's because
That's
they're
dope.
gangster as hell. That's
Yeah.
because they have what's known as the hood security system. It's great, man.
That's the
These
best
guys,
kind of
well,
security
this is
system.
one time that this guy fell off of his ladder and he cut his arm and he couldn't move, and I heard him yelling from downstairs.
Yeah.
Right. So I went up and I knocked, and then he told me to come in to help him out. Call the ambulance,
Yeah.
and then he went and he got like all stitched up and everything was good
That's
afterwards.
beautiful.
Right. Well, one time
Uh-oh.
at the time Kiana and I were living together,
Yeah.
and when we were leaving and getting ready to take off, I was like, "Hey, did you check the door? Like, did you check if it was locked or whatever?" And
Yeah.
she was like, "Oh no, I forgot." So she gets out, she goes, she locks the door, she closes it, she comes back, right? And the neighbor next door had seen that happen, right? When I got back, I guess I took my dog out for a walk or whatever, and the guy was out there, and I was just standing outside or whatever, and he goes, "Hey man, can I tell you something?" And I was like, "What's up?" And he was telling me in Spanish. I was like, "Yeah, what's up, man?" He goes, "I'm just gonna let you know, you have my back, I have yours." And I was like, "Oh, thanks, man. That means a lot." And then he took it a step further, and he goes, "Yeah, man. If I ever see anybody coming around and they mess with any of your stuff, whether it's your car, whether it's your door, you don't even have to worry about keeping your door locked anymore. I'm telling you, I got you.
Damn.
If I see them go and they mess with your stuff, I'm gonna fucking kill them." He just goes, yeah. I was like, all right,
Yeah.
dude, it's like a good ass security system, dude.
That's a beautiful thing. man.
Yeah, I mean,
That's a
yeah, no,
beautiful
obviously
thing.
he didn't mean it like that, but it was.
I mean, he might have.
That's
Shit,
funny.
I don't know. But it's a beautiful thing, and we're all socially alienated. Suicide rates have never been higher. Rates of anxiety and people on medication for that shit has never been higher. We're not supposed to be living like this. There's a better way that we can live.
Yeah.
There is.
But it's not profitable for
It's in the water, dude. They're turning the frogs gay. It's
Super.
it's not profitable for big pharma or the military industrial complex. So.
And like I know I sound like that.
No,
it's always sunny.
I want to dismiss that
Yeah.
because like I know that there's a lot of people who's just like whenever they're so adamant about something, and not necessarily just adamant, but like passionate
Yeah.
about something, it comes off as like, hey, you're kind of going over the top there.
Kinda
let's
sound like a
reel
little bit like
it-
Alex Jones.
Let's reel it back a little bit,
Yeah.
But no, I don't want to do that.
Nah, man,
normally
drop that heat.
normally I would. Normally I'd try to like run. The
He does
whole,
that
like,
shit to me the whole time.
the
Whenever
whole-
I
the
bring
whole-
anything,
the
he's
whole-
like, yeah.
the skeptic thing, because
Yeah.
I do it because I think
The
it's
septic?
necessary to kind of keep things like grounded sometimes.
Yeah.
But in this case, it's so like close, literally in my home. I
Yeah.
didn't say close to home; it's my home.
It is,
Yeah.
That
You smell like chlorine, dude.
Dude, I can still smell on me now. I'm not even
Yeah.
kidding. Like I'm
I
not
don't know
even
about you.
joking. I can.
Yeah.
Like,
I use that Irish Spring, so I smell like Irish
Hey.
Spring.
no, I definitely do too. But I mean, I rinsed it off with the chlorine, so it's like
I don't know. I mean,
But no, man, it's definitely like super close to home, and I think that the censorship thing really angered me because
Yeah.
it was like, dude, this is like one of those things that you see like go viral on like on like
Yeah.
YouTube.
yeah,
where it's
like this is not some shit that you should like. I
I'm-
never thought I would see that shit here.
Yeah.
You know what I
I'm
mean?
sure.
That type of
I'm
thing.
sure if you ever like posted on YouTube and you were to put something like angry citizen or whatever,
Yeah.
or environmental activist is barred from presenting at a place where there's a current water crisis going.
Yeah.
I'm sure it would go viral. And I mean, at that point, that would be interesting if it went national.
Yeah.
And it was like, you tried to put it on Reddit yet?
Right.
You should
Yeah.
do it, man.
No, I
It's
haven't.
you should put it
yeah,
on Reddit.
definitely do
The
it.
more you do that,
Probably
that's
super
it.
exposure.
That's a fire under their ass. That's
Yeah.
for sure. And
1,000%.
And once, because I mean, like it brings about consequences, and that's
Yeah.
unfortunate that we have to go through that route. That we have to
Right.
go through a route where it's like, hey, you have so many people who are putting like, these awful not awful, but like comments that are like super critical of the city and its officials, who want answers, and you're, instead of like, I don't even understand that mentality. It's not so much. It's like it's a deliberate misinformation is what it is. It's like, hey, you know what? Whatever you're talking about, if it's about water, just don't talk about it, right? And it's like, why? It's literally a part of the environment, and it's literally where we live. So
and it's like happening right now.
Yeah. So I don't know, man. So we're getting close to wrapping here. Is there anything you want to say, like in terms of like what you think we should do differently as citizens, and in terms of like keeping people accountable? What do you think should be done?
Yeah, and so when I criticize capitalism, I think the question comes up with like, what is the alternative, right, to all these institutions that are in place? But
all these isms.
Roger has a great example. Like, shit, if we just talk to our neighbors, we're going to be surprised as to how many of our neighbors are like willing to look out for us if we just reach out and make that human connection. Heaven forbid we stop talking about things in terms of profit or of law and start talking about things in terms of human relationships. And so there are a lot of people that are doing great work. I know Berman is a guy who does a community garden or community gardens throughout the city.
Oh, right, yeah. So we're going to do a mural there.
Yeah, that's right.
So we're doing the Consejo House mural. Yeah, he's super cool, man.
That's great.
If any of you guys are interested in learning a lot about agriculture, and not even just that, but like the native species of like bugs and pollinators here in Laredo, go and check that out. The Consejo House. It happens every Sunday at like noon or something, right? Or just before noon?
They do Saturday morning.
Oh, Saturday.
And sometimes Sunday. So Saturday typically at like 8 to 12.
Yeah, I think 9 to 12 is on Sunday that I've seen most of the time. But yeah, you check that out, Berman, right?
Berman. And so here's the other story that we could be telling instead of this one, which is you wake up on Saturday morning, you go out to the neighborhood community garden. It's harvest time, so you grab fresh fruits and vegetables, you take it back to your neighborhood, you knock on your neighbor's door, it's an older couple, you sit with them in their living room, you give them some of these things, they have access to fresh food, so they have a better overall health. You talk to them about some of these things. You say, I'm going out of town this weekend, can you keep an eye on my home? They say yes. You say, hey, we're going to have a community meeting next week. They'll say, we'll go, because obviously this is you caring about me. You're not a politician knocking on my door wanting my vote and then never coming around again. You're bringing me food. You're helping me, you're helping me be safe and healthy.
And people take notice in that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Like, all the time. We did a trash tag. It was that thing where it's like you go and you like pick things up just after Easter. Yeah. It was Earth Day, right? Yeah. And so Kiana and I woke up and I took the dog for a walk. She stayed asleep, and when I was there in the park, literally all of Slaughter Park had a bunch of plastic bags and paper plates, styrofoam plates, just up against the picket fence, not the picket fence, the metal fence, whatever, right? And so I was just kind of like really annoyed by it and seeing it, and so I went back and I woke her up and I was like, hey, let's grab a couple trash bags. Let's go and let's do this, whatever. And we were cleaning it up without the intention of doing anything like a social post or anything like that. It was literally just like we just wanted to do it. And while we were doing that, some people from out of town were walking their dog there. And just and they gave me their Instagram. I wish I could remember it, but they were filming for a documentary for something, and it was about traveling from like Canada to Mexico or something. And they were like, hey, we really like that you guys are picking up trash. That's super cool. We didn't know people did that here. And I was like, well, they did. I mean, it's obvious they don't, because we're doing it right now, but because we saw it or whatever. And they took a picture of us, and they were like, yeah, we should post it here or whatever. And then but that was that, like, little things like that, like it instills like a little, like a sense of community, because I think if anything, that's like what's missing from all of that. A sense of community is like not just so much the accountability and stuff like that, but
accountability comes. Community is the most powerful weapon that we have. So let's throw that in the mix. All of a sudden, your neighbors take responsibility for their public places, so they're kept clean. So now you're feeding your people, you're keeping your people healthy, you're keeping your people involved, you're keeping your public places clean, and now all of a sudden you don't have to depend on these politicians that obviously don't give a damn about you anyway. And we don't have to yell at them anymore. We don't have to go to council and get shooed off by them anymore. We get to take care of ourselves. And that's the whole sort of political ideology, I think, behind me, is power to the people, period.
what do you think a city official would say to that statement?
Depend on us.
Really?
Or like you're being ideologically naive or something.
Right.
It's like that's a very pie in the sky point of view.
I mean, you did it. You told me, right? You cleaned it yourself.
Yeah.
You said your neighbor watched out for you.
Yeah.
I know plenty of people that work. It's happening right now.
Yeah.
It's not pie in the sky.
Hey, man, you want some veggies?
That's right. That's right.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Cool,
I have a
dude.
lime tree in the backyard.
I actually have
cool.
I've gone to those things a couple of times. They're really cool. You guys
That's
should
pretty
check it out.
sweet.
But yeah, man, great. I feel very enlightened in the sense of like, hey, I'm gonna do something for my I'm gonna challenge you guys, whoever's watching this. Like, we don't do this. It's super cheesy in a sense, but it shouldn't be.
That's right.
But
Shouldn't
like,
be cheesy.
do something for your neighbor today, man.
Yeah.
Do something super nice.
Just say
Go
hi,
hug them.
Yeah.
I don't know about that. I don't know about hugging. Just have a conversation with them at the very least.
You know,
say hello.
Say,
Yeah.
you know, ask their children to come outside and play. See, that's what I mean. Like that whole like that making it uncomfortable. I don't mean to do that. I'm messing around. But but yeah, no, definitely do something nice for a neighbor, for your community or something.
Share a game of basketball if
Dude,
they're not
bring them some water to shower in.
Yeah.
Let's say something. Hey, this doesn't smell like chlorine. Let me give you a splash bath.
At that presentation that we gave yesterday,
Right.
Frontera, we had a ton of people bring water.
Mhm.
I mean, we had to take a whole like SUV filled water that the community donated to take to people in the South.
Mhm.
It wasn't HEB, that wasn't the city. It was just citizens that care.
I will commend like LNF, who has always been very community distributed, and also shout out sponsors, Radio on the Border,
Fourth Dimension Fridays,
Southern Star, Fourth Dimension Fridays, Southern Star. Anyway, so those guys have always been like ready to mobilize, and they were like, hey, you guys need clean water, we're rolling now. And they went and they not only donated, but they got like emergency shipments out to places that were kind of being like ravaged, ransacked, except Fiji water, which Aaron pointed out in one of his posts. That was like, everybody's like, hey, you know what? We want water, but not $4 a bottle. So we don't need that Fiji mineral. But
it's great though.
It is. So yeah, man. Well, hey, you know what? I want to do a follow-up episode.
Let's do it.
And guys, whoever's still listening at this point, if you are still tuned in, thanks very much for tuning in. And if we haven't been paying attention to your comments for a reason, because we wanted to kind of keep the conversation going. But if you guys have any questions, anything for Alec or either of us, whoever here,
probably not me. I've been quiet this whole time.
No. If you want to get involved in the conversation, like, let us know. Send us some questions or something. That way we can compile a list. We can kind of talk about it next time, because I do want to have a follow-up episode as soon as their water is back up to standard and doesn't smell like it got out of a pool.
Yeah.
And I'm interested in seeing how this kind of plays out, because I don't know if there's going to be any ramifications, but I feel like there should be.
We'll see.
So we'll see how that plays out. Also, tomorrow, I'm sorry, I'm going to cut you off. Tomorrow there is a city council meeting.
Right.
It's 5:30 or 5.
Starts at 5.
It starts at 5. Go to at the city council at the city hall. I'm sorry. Go there and make your voice heard. They have a section for public comment. So you guys go and do that. Also, we do need support for establishing the whole arts fund, which should be discussed tomorrow for like an ordinance. It's going to happen too, and check that out. Hey, Rooftop Lounge Wednesday 9 p.m. I have a show with Aaron.
Don't
go and check that out.
And mind if I plug something?
Yeah, dude, plug it in, man.
So we've been doing a lot of community organizing around these same ideas. So if you were like, oh, this is interesting, I want to know more, you can check out Red Wing Laredo on Facebook. That is going to be our hub. And that was the group that put on the presentation yesterday. So if you want to get clicked in, check it out.
What is that about? What's Red Wing Laredo? Tell us a little bit about that.
It's an organization of mostly young people, but we're looking for people, all ages, classes, creeds, the whole thing. That is, rallying around the idea of we need to be empowering the community, educating the community, defending and supporting one another. And not just waiting for when shit hits the fan to get together. Okay. So getting people plugged in. We want to do a whole bunch of different programs, and we're just getting started. So come on in.
We should have the next 4DF episode be about the city. That would be interesting to me. Actually, I don't think that would fly. Maybe not at Cultura. But
you don't think so?
No, I don't know.
Yeah, no.
I don't know.
No.
But Well, okay. Well, who runs Red Wing?
So we try not to have any sort of one
label or hierarchy.
Yeah. So it's people who care, who are committed to learning with one another, to having community, because that's the other thing. Especially if you're not like religious, you're not going to a church. Sometimes we really hunger for that sense of like, oh, these are my people. So we get together on the weekends. We have these conversations. We eat food for free. So if you're hungry. And then we're trying to pursue all these programs too, ranging from teaching people how to defend themselves, to grow their own food, to book clubs, to film showings, to all sorts of things. So
cool. Yeah. I dig that. We'll whoever's willing to come on the show and talk about that, we'll do that at some point.
Cool.
And then we'll set up. We'll see how this plays out within the next week.
Yeah, we'll see.
We'll try to do an episode, a follow-up episode on that. Josh, you got anything to add, dude?
No, not really.
Hey, 4DF last Friday was a success. I heard it was great. I was not here, but thank you to everybody who came out. If you're not aware, Fourth Dimension Fridays is our live audience podcast that happens every first Friday of the month. Cool. And we're still in full swing of Fear on the Frontera, which we have not kept up with all that much. But mainly it's because the first 8 episodes were going to be the old episodes. Anyway,
so the next ones will be pushed more.
Yeah, we're recording a couple within the next couple of days, and you'll be seeing those shortly. To that point, if anybody wants to get on the show to like voice act, for Fear on the Frontera, I'm just going to say FOTF. If you're going to get on there, if you want to get on here to voice act, or if you've got a story that you want to tell, if you want to write it out for us and just kind of get it here for us to produce it, we'll go ahead and do that. And that kind of does all of the plugs. Again, go see me Rooftop Lounge at 9 p.m. on Wednesday. Check out Red Wing. Is it just Red Wing Laredo?
Red Wing Laredo.
All right. And that's on Facebook.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So check out Red Wing Laredo. We'll put that in the show notes. We'll tag them here too. And thank you very much to Alec for being here and for having this conversation. I know you've been very busy, I imagine, with not so much the fallout, but the awakening. Or the enlightenment.
It's a bit of both, right?
Right.
But it's a good thing. It means we're headed to good places.
Cool, man. I hope you enjoyed the time on here.
Yeah, thank you very much.
And we'll see what we can do for the next
episode. Let's just keep an open dialogue, man. I feel like you'd be a badass repeat guest.
Absolutely.
Right,
honestly.
Yeah. Sounds good.
For sure.
Peace.
All right. Thank you.
Stay clean.